With only 2 days and 8 games remaining, Week 5 of the Overwatch League 2019 season promises to bring lots of excitement and entertainment as we discover who makes for Stage 1 playoffs. Plenty of teams are still fighting for the 5 remaining spots, Vancouver, New York and Toronto already booking their places, so each series left is crucial in terms of wins and map differential to see who takes those spots. Day 1, which begins this Saturday, is kicked off rather uninspiringly by the Washington Justice, who face the Paris Eternal. I would imagine most of this week's preparation for the Justice has gone into their match on Sunday against the Mayhem, that I'll touch on shortly. That is not to say they have no chance in this series, as they face an Eternal side that has lost 3 straight by combined map score of 1-11. Paris will look to this game to put them back on the right path in their hunt to make the stage playoffs, and will need a convincing victory to not only set them up for their tough clash against the Fusion, but also to begin to overturn their terrible map differential. Washington could look to try something new in this series, aside from their very passive GOATS 3-3 gomp, which Paris will hope to overrun with their aggression and not be punished as they have been by 3 much stronger sides in the previous 2 weeks. Even though the previous series has some playoff implications, it is not until afterwards that the competition really heats up, starting with one of my games of the week as the London Spitfire play the Seoul Dynasty, with a win the only chance either side has of making the stage playoffs. Historically, London have always seemed to edge out Seoul in this matchup, and both sides come into this series after a mixed Stage 1 so far, with both great and terrible results. London had seemingly been trending upwards. This was abruptly stalled after their loss to Shanghai last week, where Gesture particularly was targeted on. Seoul meanwhile played a different side against Washington in a generally comfortable game, where they exhibited a slightly different style, where they played a little slower and more counter-attacking. Most likely, the result of this game will be decided by who has the better Reinhardt performance of Gesture or Fischer, and whether these teams properly coordinate around them. Following this comes the equally important contest in playoff determination, with the Boston Uprising versus the Dallas Fuel, with the series likely in a win-and-in scenario. Both of these teams come into this game on the back of 4-0 wins over the Mayhem and the Dragons respectively, and look to be playing well with good ultimate management and team coordination. The battles between Fusions and OGE, as well as AimGod and Unco, may very well be the eventual difference in this matchup, which will likely pit the traditional 3-3 at the Uprising against the Sombra Goats variations from the Fuel. Depending on the result, we should get a better idea of how these teams stand in terms of my power rankings, and perhaps determine if one of them could be a dark horse for the Stage 1 playoffs. Day 1 on Saturday concludes with the anticipated game that sees the Atlanta Reign take on the massively popular Chengdu Hunters. Atlanta, after last week's convincing defeat to the Gladiators, need to find a win here to almost confirm their stage playoff spot, whilst Chengdu want to go from strength to strength and improve from last week's amazing series against Vancouver to get their 3rd win. The main question for this game is whether the teams mainly run 3-3 GOATs, which surprisingly would favour the performance of the Hunters if we only go by last week, with a main looking to crush Dako, or instead, if the Reign wish to match the off-meta DPS comps of Chengdu, which they have at times shown they are willing to do in this stage. Moving into the final day on Sunday, we have 4 very intriguing games that after Saturday should bring with them perhaps 3 huge playoff implications. If Paris have 4-0'd the Justice, they will still be within a chance of making the playoffs, but will need a similar performance here against Philadelphia, who themselves need a win to confirm entry into the stage playoffs. Both teams have hit rough patches in the stage, but whereas Paris ended up losing 3 games in a row, since Boombox returned, the Fusion have remained unbeaten, suggesting that they can win even if they're playing poorly. In the end, the series will test Carpe and Boombox's carry ability against the aggressive GOATs of the Eternal that may also look to target Sado and his tendency to prefer playing Winston over Reinhardt. In the most meaningless game of Day 2, the Washington Justice will likely have their last chance to get a win in Stage 1, in what should be a very competitive contest against the Florida Mayhem. The passive style of the Justice may in fact help them here, as Florida's main weakness has been the number of mistakes the team has made, particularly Swan and Chris, who are often caught out of position or misuse their ultimates. For the Mayhem, they are looking to avoid losing to the widely regarded worst team in the league, as well as emphasise the improvement in team coordination they have made, perhaps by allowing McGravy to sub in the place as Zephyr for some of the series. However, after this is one game that holds potentially multiple playoff implications depending on the results for Saturday, as the Houston Outlaws take on the Atlanta Reign. Depending on prior scores, both teams may perhaps need a win here, the Outlaws most likely a sweep if they want to be within a chance of making the stage playoffs. Houston will have to play a perfect game from their tank line if they want to win, as it's been largely behind Muma, Spree and Dante that this team has found any success. Atlanta, meanwhile, will be hoping that Saturday's game showed that Week 4 was just a bad game, and that they can exploit with their aggressive play a weak support line for the Outlaws that has been one of the major reasons they have struggled, even against teams like the Valiant last week. Week 5, and subsequently the regular season games of Stage 1, conclude with an exciting rematch of the Vancouver Titans against the Guangzhou Charge. Vancouver will be looking for a convincing win here to snatch the top seed from New York Excelsior, and steady the ship following a surprisingly close escape to the Hunters last week. Guangzhou, meanwhile, know that a win here likely seals a spot in the playoffs for them, so I expect the Charge to look to exploit bumpers over aggression as Chengdu did, as well as catch them off guard with the use of their Sombra that could get the upset victory in their revenge series. As for my predictions, I currently stand after 4 weeks at an overall record of 37 and 25, so I'm looking to improve that with this week's games. Starting with day 1, I think Paris should have little trouble in taking down the Justice, but may lose concentration and drop one map in a 3-1 win that will almost certainly ruin their playoff chances. In what should be a great series, I think once again London will topple Seoul, but in a tense 3-2 victory, which may condemn both sides to missing the playoffs. Following this, as much as I'm hesitant to, I'm still going to back the Dallas Fuel to overcome the Boston Uprising in a 3-1 game that will clinch their playoff spot, before Atlanta overcome the Wacky Hunters 3-1 themselves. In regard to day 2, I think Philadelphia will just edge out Paris to kick us off by a scoreline of 3-2, before the Florida Mayhem pick up their second win of the stage in an uncomfortable 3-2 victory. Afterwards, I think Atlanta will be too strong for the Houston Outlaws and will lock up a playoff place with a 3-1 win, before the stage concludes with the Vancouver vs Guangzhou game ending how it did the first time, with a 3-2 Titans win. For those wondering, if these predictions were to end up being correct, the teams joining New York, Vancouver and Toronto would be Atlanta, Dallas, Philadelphia, San Francisco and lastly London. And with that, I'd like to thank you for watching. I'd love to hear your own thoughts and opinions on these games, and who you think will make the playoffs themselves. Otherwise, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed, for continuing Overwatch League content moving forward.